All right, George, my name is Bryan Russ. Some people call me Rusty. That's my nickname. I'm 59 years old. I was born and raised in Hearn, Texas. My dad was the DA there, district attorney for 25 years. I'm married to my wife, Laura. We've been married for 38 years. She's from Lake Jackson, Texas. We have four children, three sons and a daughter. One son practices law with me. I have a son who's an assistant U.S. attorney in Plano, Texas. I have a daughter who's a nurse practitioner in Bryan College Station. And then our youngest, Jake, is the head basketball coach at Palestine Westwood. And we have 6 grandchildren and one on the way. And I've been practicing law for almost 35 years. I primarily do litigation, but our firm is small. And in a small town, you do pretty much whatever walks in the door. Do a lot of real estate, but I have handled at least 50 jury trials, primarily in Robertson and Falls County. I don't know how many hundreds and hundreds of cases I have tried, but one of the reasons that I am running for district judge is because of my experience in the courtroom and in the law. So.
What made you decide to pursue a career in law?
Well, my dad was the district attorney, so I was raised by a lawyer. Probably I thought initially in my life I was going to be a basketball player and a basketball coach, but my knees and my inability to jump became a factor. I started studying the law because of my dad. And fell in love with it. I like to represent people. I've represented individuals. I've represented companies. I've represented municipalities. I've represented counties. And I like making sure that people are represented. I had a case not too long ago where a young man had a terrible traffic accident. And a young lady in his vehicle was killed, and he was driving way too fast. And I was hired to represent him. He needed a lawyer in the worst way. A lot of people got mad at me about that, but that young man needed a representation. He needed an advocate. And I think that's what I fell in love with, George, was trying to make sure that people had someone that was there to speak for them when they really couldn't speak for themselves. So I think that's what drove me to do it.
Speaking of, you mentioned that some people got upset because you took on the case.
Yes.
In the forum that took place on February the 15th,
Sure.
It was alleged that you walked out of the forum. Could you give a reason
Sure.
as to why you decided to walk out
Absolutely,
of the forum?
absolutely, George. And I appreciate that question because I've heard that as well. I'm no stranger to debate. I'm no stranger to arguing. I do it for a living, and I don't mind doing it anytime and any place. But some years ago, I had a contested divorce case that we litigated. The gentleman on the other side was not happy with the result. I did not represent him. He thereafter threatened me with physical harm. He at one point pushed me up against the wall, not at the same time, and we had a physical confrontation. He showed up at my office intimidating my legal staff one day, and I testified against him in a criminal case some years later. And I haven't seen that gentleman in a long time. So we were at the forum. I had about 22 supporters there with Vote Russ t-shirts on. We were prepared to go, prepared to answer legitimate, reasonable questions. And this man walked in. And I knew that he had already been at the district attorney's office the week earlier because they called me and said that he was there acting strange. So when he walked in, while I wasn't physically scared for myself, I was not happy with, did not feel comfortable for my wife, for my daughter, for my 2 sisters, for my legal staff was there, nor for my supporters. We had just had 17 high school students killed. This gentleman walked in and gave me a look, and I did not want a physical confrontation. I did not want to be heckled, which I knew that that's what he was fixing to do. And so I told the organizer that I did not feel comfortable with my supporters being there with this gentleman, and I decided not to put them at risk. So I didn't feel any efficacy to stay, knowing that it was going to create a situation that was going to devolve into something ugly, and that's why I left. Oh, and by the way, as an aside, for those that think that I'm not very serious about that, later that same evening, someone shot 5 times at my home through the woods, and I made a report to the sheriff's department about it. Now, do I know who did it? No. It's just awfully coincidental. So, yes, I left.
In your 35 years of experience, were there other times that your life has been in danger or threatened?
George, when you represent people, sometimes they don't like the result. When I walk into the courtroom as an advocate, I'm charged with the duty to represent my client the best that I can. All lawyers really do are 2 things, is we ask questions and we make arguments. I have had, over 35 years, some threats. This gentleman that I was talking about previously, I think is probably the most serious. I have had dead animals put in my mailbox. I have received notes from disgruntled people that were on the other side. And I don't, for the most part, take them seriously. This person I took, and I do take very seriously. And if anybody questions that, you might want to ask the gentleman who represented him and his staff, because he did the same thing to them. And they will back me up and say, this person is not someone that you need to be around if he's threatened you. But yes, I've had that. Growing up with my dad, who was a district attorney, I mean, he had the same issues. I was aware of it. My wife does not normally know about it. I don't take it home. Some of it is sometimes comical. I got a note one time that said that God was going to deal with me. He was going to take away all of my golden goblets and my concubines. So I took the note home to my wife. I said, go ahead and box up the goblets, but they're not going to get my concubines. But it was a joke. I mean, but yes, I've had that, George. I think that's part of it, though.
The other question that I have to ask you in regards to questions that I've been seeing circulating on social media, there was an article on KBTX circulating from 2009 where you were named in a racketeering lawsuit.
Right, with about 30 other people.
With about 30 other people. Right. What was the result of those charges?
About 10 years ago, a lawyer who does not live here, who now lives in New York, who I'd never dealt with, filed a federal lawsuit against me. I just happened to be the guy named first, and about 30 other people, including all of my law partners, my son, including our sheriff, including some business people in the community, the banks. And I was accused of, along with those people, of stealing a child. I was accused of stealing cattle, and I was accused of stealing property. Now, you know that everything on social media is true, right? Well, that's not true. What in truth happened was that I had a child custody case, and everybody had lawyers, and I won the child custody case. I represented the bank who had a lien on a gentleman's cattle. He was not feeding the cattle. They were dying, which means the bank's collateral was devaluing and dying. So he filed a lawsuit to foreclose on the cattle, and the judge ordered the cattle sold, and the money brought to my trust account, and we paid off his note, and we gave the balance to he and his lawyer. Over the property, my law partner filed a lawsuit to clear title to some property, and somehow or another we got accused of taking property. So the ultimate disposition of that was the federal judge dismissed it. Matter of fact, he said in his order, and I can certainly give you a copy of it, people don't read all the way down. They just read the lawsuit. If they read the disposition of the lawsuit, you will find that it was disposed of as being frivolous, that there was no evidence to back it up. In fact, the judge, I think I can quote him, he said that this suit was baseless, frivolous, and that no reasonable attorney would bring the suit. Not to mention that attorney and his clients were sanctioned $25,000 for filing a baseless, frivolous lawsuit, and it was dismissed. It was upheld by the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, and of course we never collected the $25,000. I will say this, that lawyer has been publicly reprimanded by the State Bar of Texas for lying. I think that he has been disbarred by the Washington, D.C. court for doing the same thing to lawyers in Maryland, and he was sanctioned $125,000, I believe, there. And I think that there are disbarment proceedings currently pending in California where he's done similar things. So I just regret that people only read so far. If they will read the disposition, then they will see that it was an attack on people's reputation and people's credibility. I would have told you, George, 25 years ago, that there is no such thing as a frivolous lawsuit. I was wrong, okay? There are those people that will file a suit to attack someone, to hurt them, to hurt their families. And I can tell you firsthand that lies are hurtful. And one of the things that I stand for now, even though I do a lot of litigation, is that if I were lucky enough to become district judge, I'm going to look at those civil lawsuits very, very carefully. And if they don't have any evidence to base the allegations, then they're going to get dismissed, and someone's going to get sanctioned for not telling the truth. So yes, George, that's what happened.
Personally, how do you persevere? How do you navigate your way through
The mud and the muck?
Yeah, through the muck.
Because God knows the truth. I know the truth. The people that are intelligent, that want to read and read the whole thing, know the truth. So I hold my head up. First of all, I have 4 children. I didn't need to steal a child. I don't need to steal cattle. I make a living trying lawsuits. I have a lot of clients, and I don't need to steal property because I make a living trying lawsuits. So there's always going to be those people that want to believe the worst. There's always going to be those people that want to see someone fail. And I just am of the attitude that as long as I know the truth, as long as my family knows the truth, as long as my God knows the truth, then I'm not going to let it prevent me from doing what I have to do. I think Dr. Seuss said it best. To those that this matters, or to those that care, don't really matter. To those that matter, don't care. My family knows. My children know. And that's what I do. I don't like it, but people are going to lie about you, George, and there's just no evidence. I asked them, where is the evidence? And there's not any. That's why it got dismissed. I hope that answers your question, George.
Yes, sir. What will be your top priority for the counties that you will be presiding over?
I think the top priority will be to work hard to run that court as efficiently as we can, not only in terms of the number of cases that are processed through there, but also from an economic standpoint. I've been in that courtroom for 35 years. I have to say that we're very fortunate that I personally believe that Judge Stem is a fantastic judge. If he wasn't retiring, I would not be sitting here today. But there are some procedural things that I might manage a little differently in terms of lawyers' time, in terms of clients' time. but you always have to be mindful of the economics of the situation. So I think my top priority would be to manage the schedule, make sure that everybody is treated fairly, make sure that justice is served across the board, regardless as to your race, your creed, your religious status, or your financial status. I want to make sure that everybody knows that they're going to receive a fair hearing. I will say this, that a district court is the highest level trial court in the state. It's where real people come with real problems, and they need a real resolution of them. They may not always like the resolution, but when they leave that courtroom, I think it's important that they know that they've been heard and that their case has been thoroughly examined and that they have received a fair hearing. And that's my goal, George.
What are some of your core beliefs from a personal, professional, and judicial standpoint?
My core beliefs is my family is first. God is right there with them. I was born and raised a Baptist. I will die a Baptist. I'm probably with some humor, I consider myself a shallow water Baptist, which means that when they baptize me, they didn't get me all the way under, and it's just a joke. But my family, my religious beliefs, from a legal perspective, I am a real believer in advocacy. I want everybody to have a representative in that courtroom. In the district courtroom, especially, there are some very technical rules. We have the rules of evidence, we have the rules of procedure, and all of those are important. However, there's not a day in the life of a district judge that he doesn't find himself standing on what I call the thin gray line, which means that he has to make a discretionary call that affects the lives of those people. So one of my core beliefs is to make those discretionary calls in the right way, where people know that they have received a fair trial. Now, they're not always going to like what a district judge does, just like they don't like what I do as an attorney. That's just part of the job. But I don't want somebody coming into the court and thinking, well, I didn't get a fair hearing. I didn't get a fair shake. The judge was biased or prejudiced. That's what I want to avoid. And I want there to be fair play in that court for everybody. So I think that that's pretty much my core belief. Now, there's not many things I haven't seen in almost 35 years, but I have seen good judges, and I've seen very poor judges. And so I want to model myself after those that I consider to be very good judges. And I think that experience in that courtroom is something that's beneficial to me, George.
As a judge, how do you discern what is fair?
Well, a judge is supposed to be neutral and what is called detached. I can't sit here, it's actually unconstitutional for me to tell you how I would rule in any particular case, because I haven't heard any facts, I haven't heard any evidence. It depends on whether it's a bench trial or a jury trial. Now, fairness is a combination of things. It's not one particular thing. We have a duty to follow the law. We also have a duty to be fair and to be just. Sometimes those are not always compatible. We want them to be, and that's where the lawyers come in, is they want to make these arguments, and the judge has to discern which, is this something that is relevant, that needs to be factored in? I'll give you an example. One of the things that we do a lot is child custody cases. And so it's like a pie. One of the pieces of the pie is, what does the child want to do? Well, some children know. I mean, it depends on whether the child is 12 or 16. A 16-year-old, he's going to be able to articulate better than a 12-year-old. So a judge would look at that piece of the pie, and he would say, well, I'm going to give more credibility to this child in this case because he's 16 as opposed to if he's 12. So fairness is a broad thing. But I sincerely believe that it's a combination of following the law and doing the correct thing. Now, sometimes you can't articulate it, but you know it when you see it. And so it would depend on the facts, and it would depend on the law and the evidence. My instinct tells me that in every case, there's going to be somebody that thought you were very fair and some that thought you were not so fair. And that's part of the district judge's duties and responsibilities.
Going back to your core beliefs, what are some of your core spiritual beliefs?
I believe in Jesus Christ. That doesn't mean that I'm overly spiritual, and I don't think you can be in the courtroom. God's law and man's law do not always coexist on the same level. The judge has to follow the law that man has created. And it's a real interesting dilemma for some, and I don't want to bore you too much, but in Germany during World War II, there were judges on the bench that were following what the Nazis passed. One example was that if you were German, you couldn't marry a non-German person. Well, when they lost the war, these judges got prosecuted, okay? And they got prosecuted for war crimes where they sentenced people to labor camps, concentration camps, because they were German and they had a relationship with a Jewish person. That's just wrong. So the dilemma becomes, well, what does the judge do? The law was you couldn't do it. But the judge knows in his heart that law is wrong. So the concept was they got prosecuted and they were found guilty. Now, none of them were sentenced to death, but they were sentenced to jail. So one of the judges from Germany wanted to have a conversation with one of the American judges, and he said, look, all I was doing was following the law. And the American judge looked at him and said, yeah, but you knew it was wrong, and you did it anyway. The dilemma is he probably would have been killed if he hadn't followed the law. I hope in America that never happens. I hope the judge, if he sees that the law is bad, then first thing we look at is it constitutional? Because the Constitution is the Bible of our laws. If it's not constitutional, the judge has a duty to say it's not. Now, that doesn't make you an activist judge. That just makes you following the Constitution. What happens, though, is I'll use the abortion scenario. The United States Supreme Court said that a lady in this country, under certain circumstances, can have an abortion. Is that godly? Probably not. But the judge's duty is to follow that law and put his personal religious beliefs aside. And it's when you don't do that I think that you're not following your duty and your oath.
What would you say makes you the best candidate over your opponent?
My experience. I have tried, bear in mind, we're talking about a district judgeship. We're not talking about a city court where they do traffic tickets. We're not talking about a county court where all they have is class A or B misdemeanors. We're talking about a district court position. I don't want to be rhetorical, but I'm going to ask you a question, George. If you had a divorce case, and bear with me because I think that I'm going to make a point to the viewers. If you had a divorce case, would you go hire a lawyer that's never done a divorce? Probably not. If you had a car wreck case, would you go hire a lawyer that's never done a car wreck case? Probably not. If you had a contested issue with real estate over the construction of a deed, would you go hire a lawyer that's never drawn a deed? Probably not. And I could go on and on. If a pipeline company came to you and they want to put a pipeline across your property, would you go hire a lawyer that's never done a condemnation case? Probably not. So my question is, why would you want to have a judge that's never handled a condemnation case, that's never handled a car wreck case, never handled a divorce case, never handled a child custody case? If you're not going to hire a lawyer that's never done it, why would you want a judge on the bench that's never done it? I've done those things. My opponent, I don't believe has, at least not in Robertson and Falls counties. I searched the records. I wanted to be fair. I've been practicing 34 years. My opponent's only been licensed about 8 or 9 years, but he's only really been practicing law, I think, maybe 3 years. So I wanted to judge apples to apples. So I pulled the records. I've handled over 235 cases in this district in 8 years. My opponent has been named on pleadings twice. So my question is, to answer your question, I believe that my experience is what sets us apart. A gentleman asked me the other night, Mr. Russ, have you ever been a judge? The answer is no, I have not been. I've never run for anything in my life. This is the first time I've ever been a candidate for anything. And he said, well, your judge is, or your opponent is the municipal judge in Rosebud. I said, that's true. I said, but with all due respect, I do not believe that traffic court gives you any experience to be a district court judge. I believe being in that courtroom, doing what I've done for 35 years, is the distinction between the two of us.
What made you decide to come onto the judicial side of the law? What prompted that decision?
That's a legitimate question. I think time and age, knowledge. I have been representing clients, like I said, for almost 35 years. It is a natural evolution for an older lawyer, I'll be 60 in April, to evolve to try to be a judge. Because you've got experience, you've handled a multitude of different types of cases, and I will tell you what my father told me a long time ago. He said, son, litigation is a young man's game. I didn't know what he meant at the time. As I got a little maturity on me now, I know that it takes a toll. I know that physically and mentally it can become very taxing. So I see it as a natural evolution to take my experience and use it for the public good. And that's one of the things that drove me. I will tell you this. I had a client, I can't tell you who it is, Kim, that I've represented for a long time. She came in and she said, I want to tell you two things, Bryan. She said, number one, I don't want you to do this. And I looked at her and I said, okay. She said, because I don't want to lose my lawyer. She said, on the other hand, you have to do it because you're the only one that's experienced enough to walk in there on day one and do this job. And so I think it's a natural evolution, George, and that's what I'm doing.
In closing, is there anything that you would like to say to the voters out there?
Well, I would like to say the following things. That I do believe that my experience in that courtroom is a distinct advantage because I think that I will be able to walk in on day one and nothing's going to be new to me. Nothing's going to be out of the ordinary to me. I've handled criminal cases and civil suits, and I'm not going to be in a strange environment. I'm at home in that courtroom, and I'm going to be there. The other thing is, I think this is a very, very important election. I think either the people want an experienced candidate that's been there, or one that's not experienced. But it's a little deeper than that. This election is going to be decided in the primary. I have been all over this district. I've been all the way from Mumford to Otto and from Chilton to a little place called Wheelock over in Robertson County. And I have found two things. I don't care what your race, creed, color, religion is. We all want two things. We want a safe place to live and a good place to raise our children. And I think the district court plays a significant role in that. I think that the people need to know that that court is doing what they need to do with the people that they need to do it to, whether it's a criminal case or a civil suit. And so I think experience makes a difference. Now, I want to say one thing. There are those individuals that are going to violate the law and that are probably going to have to lose their liberty because of it. There are other individuals that have made a mistake, that have a family, have children, have a job, but they made a mistake. They don't need to be treated the same way as the guy that is perpetually in trouble doing the same thing over and over again. They need to be given an opportunity to save their lives, to become a productive member of society. And I really sincerely believe that's when experience makes the difference. You remember me telling you about the thin gray line? That's the thin gray line. And that's when the maturity and the experience of the judge makes a tremendous amount of difference. And I think that I bring that to this particular race, and I would just ask the people to consider that. If they want to believe the lies, I can't do anything about it. But if they want to believe the truth, then they will do so.